Hi, this is Steve Scanlon. I am with Building Champions, and this is a conference call. And I think it's funny. I am coming more and more, becoming more and more used to this methodology. And I used to spend all these precious minutes up front making excuses for this technology about conference calls and all that. But in the end, I have to embrace it. I think it's a good way to speak to people. And so I know many of you are out there, and I'm pretty excited about this topic. It's a topic that we speak to quite a bit in coaching. It is sort of interesting as we talk about even the title of Why Plans Fail. The title itself kind of led me down the road of, I started thinking I'm a pretty optimistic guy, and I didn't, the marketing guy, Todd, and I went back and forth on the title for this, and the whole idea of failing at anything, I kind of wanted to do why our plans succeed and all that. However, why plans fail, and obviously I'm going to come up with and why they shouldn't. I don't know why that negativity sells, but it's really great to have a lot of you on the call. And so in the spirit of that, I was going to jump right into getting into our business planning tool and coaching you through that. But instead, I thought I would play true and at least come up with a handful of things that I thought would be important for you in terms of the top reasons why plans fail. Obviously, as I go through these, I came up with 10, so when I go through them, I'm hoping that you can kind of hear the David Letterman part of this. I mean, roll the drum in your own mind if you want to. I don't know that I came up with these in any particular order, and obviously these kind of stem from my coaching. I always tell people as a coach, I don't really try to have a lot of theories. I think I'm a pretty good seed spreader and listener, and so I can hear about what's working and not working a lot. And so a lot of the why they fail don't come from my own philosophies, but rather, unfortunately, having seen a lot of plans fail, and that's, I guess, the genesis of this. So without further ado, I'm going to go through 10 different reasons why plans fail. If you're prone to taking notes, take some. As I hit this number one, and we come across all 10 of them, if that hits you, write down, obviously, the opposites and create maybe some of your own action plans, and I'll expand upon a few. Okay, so number one reason why plans fail is we don't have one. I know that seems a little redundant, if you will. But the truth of the matter is many of those of us, especially who coach and who speak about this, it's pretty remarkable how we can talk about things like you should have a plan and you should have a plan. And there are times when we talk so much about it, we can actually believe that we have one when we don't. And the truth of the matter is I hope you're on the call today, and if you brought other people in, that's wonderful. Don't just subscribe to having a plan, but actually have a plan. I'm hearing myself say that and going, well, maybe that falls under the category of things that make people go, duh. But it's remarkable how many people who would teach a course on this actually don't have one themselves. So the number one reason plans fail is because we don't have one. Number two, we've convinced ourselves that planning isn't for us. I call high eyes. That's a language that we use in DISC. DISC is an acronym that stands for the 4 different behavioral patterns that all 7 billion people have. I, in DISC, for those of you that are clients, I stands for that real relational individual. And I'm one of those. And a lot of times when we're so relational, we're into people, we love going out, being with people, we kind of convince ourselves that, we don't need a plan. We're just really good at swinging it and winging it from the hip. That's one of the reasons why our plans fail, is we've convinced ourselves that we don't need one. And so I think in particular that style of individual needs to pay attention to that one and be particularly cautious about finding themselves and convincing themselves that they don't need one. Number three, we're too busy. I'll come back one day and do an entire Champion's Edge call on the we're too busy concept. In fact, I bet there have been Champion's Edge calls on the we're too busy concept. It's entirely why we even do and have one of our core 4s is priority management. But we're too busy to actually go do a plan. Well, if we're too busy to do a plan, we're working against ourselves because we're trying to get out of being busy, and one key way to do that is have a plan. So if you're too busy to put together a document that would help you with busyness, well, then you live in a Far Side cartoon and we can't help you. That's just a lather, rinse, repeat thing and a rat wheel that you will never get off. So when you catch yourself saying you're too busy, We've got to continue to work through that. Number 4, we get distracted. I speak about this one quite a bit. I ask large groups of people often about the whole distracted thing, and I want to call your attention to the past participle of the verb to distract. When we get distracted, what we're effectively doing there is we are abdicating responsibility of our distraction out to the world. I think it's far more powerful. I think it's a far more empowering thought to say, I allow for distractions. So again, that's one of the reasons the plans fail, is because we walk out into the world and say, man, I get so distracted during the day. Well, that's one of the reasons we fail, is because we get distracted. So if we don't want to fail, step 1 in that is at least saying that right. I allow for distractions. And by the way, again, we won't have a lot of time for it here. If you allow for distractions and you'll finally admit that, and we admit that collectively, we can disallow for distractions, and that's a really good thing. All right, number 5, we've tried planning before and it just wasn't fruitful. Well, I have no doubt in my mind that many people on the call right now have tried planning before. They've tried a lot of things before, and once or twice you didn't follow it, quote unquote, you got distracted or whatever the other things were, and now we don't do it at all anymore. Well, that's partly why we want to talk about it today, and I've written about this extensively, about getting back up on the horse. A lot of times we don't want to keep trying things that weren't fruitful for us in the past, all because we want to avoid an inevitable failure that we foresee. So that's just sort of a way of saying, if I don't try at all, then I don't have to fail. And I think we can all kind of see through the fallacy of that. Look, if you've tried before and failed, try again. Maybe the angle with which I'm going to share today, maybe the steps that we're going to share it, the simplicity with which we're going to share it, this could be the time that's going to really work for you. So don't allow past failures to dictate future action. Number 6, our plans aren't tied to something bigger. And I put a little hyphen here with vision. So often we have a difficult time getting even our own clients, and certainly many people that we coach live, to make plans. And if you can't do something tactical, then we go and speak about something strategic like vision. That's when really people start getting like, that seems so esoteric. But here's the deal. If you don't have a vision for where you're going, it's really difficult to make a plan to get there. And often when we don't have a vision, my experience as a coach is, it doesn't mean we can't make a plan without a vision, but if we don't have a vision, we plan for 2 things. Number 1, we plan what somebody else tells us to. And it's not part of our heart. It's not part of what we wanted to. And of course it's going to fail if it's not ours. Or number 2, if we don't have a vision, we end up planning on kind of our emotion du jour. How do I feel today? So when you have a vision of where you're going, you can kind of eliminate those things because it's tied to something bigger. And so one thing, if your plans have failed in the past, you might not want to just jump into a plan, but there's going to be a handful of you that go, maybe I really got to get serious about a vision. Number 7, the process seems complicated and daunting. I can whip through this one really quickly. It's about the entire, the bulk of this call, or at least the intent of this call, is to get to our simple business planning tool. And we'll talk a little bit about simplicity, but I do believe that there are some plans that are complicated and daunting, but they just simply don't have to be, and that's going to be what we're going to talk about here in a little bit. Number 8, we just don't follow them. So even after having written a plan, I think this one's a little bit linked to not having a vision. Again, if you don't have a vision and you write a plan and then the next thing you know you're not following your plan, it's partly because it wasn't tied to something bigger. But oftentimes, again, maybe this one's linked to a lot of my different top 10. We get distracted, we simply don't follow them. So we want to help you with the simplicity of a plan that you'll actually write and you'll actually follow. Number 9, someone told us we had to. Again, there's many behavioral patterns out there. Maybe every one of you out there. Certainly I'm like this, and I have to raise my own hand and recognize that I'm like this. But if someone walks up to you and says, you have to do this, I am more and more convinced in life that there's just something innate to all humanity that just our initial response is, no, I don't. Or why? We learn that when we're kids. Go tell any child of any age, and I think we realize that we're all 30, 40, and 50-year-old children of all these ages, but tell a child they have to do something. You will see that their innate response is to question why. So when we're told we have to, we often kind of hold back and don't want to do that because somebody else is shoving it down our throat. So today I want to not tell you have to, but really invite you into it and hopefully get you to see that you're free to, as opposed to being forced to. And then lastly, number 10, which we don't have a number for, but you can see it here if you're looking at our our screen. Number 10, the number one reason people don't plan is simply because of fear. Fear. And so you can kind of see this guy up here if you're looking at our slideshow on the webinar. I don't know that fear always looks like that. We were just looking for a way to kind of get that out. But like I said, maybe I'll come back in due time. I could take an entire call and speak to fear. It comes up over and over and over in coaching again. I don't know what people are afraid of because fear is such a pervasive thing. Some people are afraid to fail. Some people are afraid to succeed. And, fear comes in so many different flavors and colors. It's just sort of hard to nail down. But I throw it up here as number one because not many people want to admit, like, wow, it's really fear. But in the end, that's what it is. And so, again, we could speak to that. I think the other thing about it is ultimately planning has to do with being different. And by being different, I'm not talking about differentiating yourself, but if you, okay, so I'm just follow this logic here really quickly. If you make a plan and the plan is for yourself to go get better, right? Why wouldn't you make a plan to get better? Well, that sounds all good, but the process of getting better implies that you're going to change something. And when you change something, again, the more and more we study about emotional intelligence and all that's going on, whenever change is involved, there's something innate in our brain that says, don't do it. And so plans, even good ones, even ones that point to a future and a hope and all that stuff, plans can oftentimes drum up some kind of fear because what we were doing we liked, and our brain likes to do the same things over and over and over. So just know that, because I think knowing that may help you actually write a good plan, and we don't have to be afraid of the different things. You know, again, I could do a whole thing on all the things we don't have to be afraid of, but not the least of which, I think it was a president that said fear itself is the number one thing we shouldn't be afraid of. So anyway, the courage to keep it simple. Again, as we work right now, we're going to go into, if you have in front of you our simple business planning tool, I think it was Albert Einstein that said, if you cannot explain what you're doing to a 6-year-old, then you don't understand it yourself. So, that's kind of an interesting way to look at it, and I think that sort of frameworks what we've done with the simple business planning tool. I'm going to give you 3 pretty simple steps and 3 pretty easy ways to have a very, very good business plan. And I think it takes courage to keep it simple. And we can, again, I'll address that more later, or you can ask me about that, shoot me an email, whatever. But there is courage to simplicity. Let's go into it. If you have your outline there in front of you, if you have our one-page business planning tool in front of you, you'll notice that it's on one page. That's why we call it that, the one-page business planning tool. If you don't have that, info@buildingchampions.com. You can ask us for that tool, and certainly we would be happy to put that tool in front of you. Again, getting people the tools is not necessarily the trick. Getting people to implement the tools will forever be the trick. But having said that, we're always happy to provide what it is that we're speaking about out to you as a tool. So if you need that, by all means, reach out to us. So the one-page business planning tool, very, very briefly here, and we've just got a handful of minutes that I want to go through this, and I'm going to go kind of quickly. 3 pretty simple steps, and once you complete all 3 of these steps, you have the makings of a really wonderful, very usable, very simple business planning tool you can keep on your desk. We've had some people, shrink it down, put it on a business card. It can be that simple. And so please don't dismiss the simplicity with the power. There's a huge power to doing this and writing it in the way that we have it, and so a lot of people can kind of disregard something that isn't a little bit more complicated. And I know many of my colleagues here at Building Champions have actually used this tool with owners of massive companies that have had huge amounts of employees and direct reports and lots of different channels and divisions, and they're still using the simple business planning tool because it's something that they can keep and follow. So 3 steps. Number 1 is the outcomes. You see that here. We call it outcomes. There are some synonyms with this. You can call them numbers. You can call them goals. We'll call them outcomes for time being. But you should know what your numbers are. You should know what your outcomes were and are. If you are a realtor, if you are in the mortgage business, if you are in the restaurant business, if you're a lawyer, it wouldn't matter. If you're even a doctor, it doesn't matter. What are your outcomes? How are you measuring things? We coach some people that are in the nonprofit side of the business. Knowing how many appointments you need to have, knowing exactly what it is that you are shooting for with regard to the numbers is very, very important. And getting those is not difficult. But again, we're shocked as coaches how many people walk around us and they don't even know this basic fundamental thing. Is it how much money you want to make? Is it how much revenue you want to create? Is it how many people that you want to reach? That must be declared, and it must be written down very, very clearly. And when it is, it actually ends up dictating these other two strategies. So know your numbers. Be very clear about them. If you need to go out and get a little research done or pull up a few reports or whatever it is, do it. Make the calculation and have down, it might be even 2 or 3 numbers, but it's not that complicated. Know your numbers. Number 2. Wow, look at that ugly guy running. Anyway, that ugly guy's me, by the way. Anyway, disciplines. Now, this is where, again, as a coach, I probably spend, and I'm just spitballing here, but I may spend 60 to 70% of my time at this part of the business planning tool in this concept with people and disciplines. When you can identify on one sheet of paper the 4 or 5, possibly 6 disciplines, I think on that sheet we give you an opportunity to have 6, but the truth of the matter is you could have 4, I've got some clients that have never done this. We start with 1. What's one simple discipline that you can do repeatedly over and over and not miss it? You might want to start with 1, 2, or 3. If you're clear on all your disciplines and want to list them all out here, list them all out, and that's fine. Here's the crucial thing. There's a couple of crucial things, but I think the most crucial things with disciplines is that they have to be specific. Many of you have seen that acronym SMART, S-M-A-R-T, that stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, with a time frame. If your disciplines aren't SMART, they're not disciplines. It's that clear. If you can't measure them, if you can't say how much, and so when we get into life planning, we go through this very same process, but kind of keeping it real to business. I'll give you a classic example. We get to disciplines and people will write stuff like, I need to prospect more. Now, that's a fine idea, and it's very likely that you do need to prospect more, but that's not the best way or even an accurate way to express a discipline. You see, until you can write down how much more, to whom, when, where, and get really specific with that, the crazy thing that I've seen in coaching is we can live with the idea that we should prospect more for a long time and actually never prospect more. Why? Because specificity takes courage. Again, back to courage. So many things take courage. I believe that when we get specific, there's a certain sense that we are robbing ourselves of a certain freedom, right? Anybody can say they can prospect more, but by the time you get to being specific, it'll start to feel like, if I say it or state it like that, then I got to do it. Well, that's the point. As long as what you have to do is for you. Don't do it for other people. But if you can even have courage within yourself to make your discipline specific. The other thing about disciplines is that they are always expressed in a frequency. I'm going to do something daily. I will do something weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. I've got an annual discipline to review my life plan. When you're expressing a discipline, it must be smart and it must be expressed in some sort of frequency and not an end date. Okay, so have your disciplines down. So we've got numbers, we've got disciplines, and then the third component is what we call projects. They've often been called improvements. In fact, I think on our tool it says improvement and projects. So synonymous, they kind of mean the same thing. And this is, I can kind of make mincemeat out of this one pretty quickly. Projects and disciplines are related to one another, but there's a couple little distinctions about them that end up being really critical to this plan. Number 1, projects are not expressed in a frequency. Projects get expressed in an end date. I will complete something by a certain date, by the end of the month, by the end of the year. Before the end of the week, I will get that done. And so that's the key difference between projects and disciplines. The other thing about projects is you may want to distinguish if you have a list of projects. Sometimes projects are what we call one-and-dones, just something you need to do and get it off your plate and have it done. Other times projects, much like this picture that we're showing you here, build a building. Well, there's a lot that goes into that project. And so we have the 6 steps of implementation. That's another tool that we're happy to send you. I utilize the 6 steps of implementation specifically with my clients with projects. So if you'd like to see the 6 steps of implementation, that's fine. We've got a lot of tools here at Building Champions that help different people do different things, but the 6 steps, in my view, really help people work through projects, and it's specifically helpful around ones that have multiple steps related to them. I've got to learn a new software. I've got to hire a new person. Anyway, if you have, and so here's the summarization of this whole thing, if you have goals and numbers and outcomes, that's the first one, outcomes. If you've got your disciplines written specifically, stated explicitly, courageously smart, and you've got your improvements and projects down, all on one sheet of paper. And by the way, your improvements and projects, what do you have, 4 or 5 down there? I realize that some of my clients have 80 things they got to get done. We try to narrow it down and keep that project list to the most crucial 4 or 5. So think about that. Your numbers, outcomes, specific and stated disciplines, and projects that you need to complete. That is something that you can live with for an entire year. It can be on your desk. You can scratch stuff off, keep it going, and I think the simplicity of it makes it great. You'll see that that business plan falls in the bottom left-hand corner there in our overall core 4. We do start with our life plan. We get to business vision. That vision leads us into making a plan, and in that plan, that tells us where we're going, and then from there we really work with people on how are they managing their priorities, which, by the way, stem from their business plan. So that's kind of how that whole thing fits together, and so I wanted to show you that. The last thing I will show you is this little slide here. If you can see it, it is the law of diminishing intent. This one took us years and years to develop as a slide. Just kidding, it's like 3 lines. But if you'll just kind of look at it, and maybe for some of you it'll remind you of an economics class of seeing charts and graphs, but all this basically says is the probability that you'll take action diminishes over time. So if you heard me today and you're saying, you know what, I'm going to go do this plan, here's my recommendation as a coach, go and go quickly. If you say to yourself, yeah, I think I'll think about that for a while and really go out, let me tell you something, just from an overall perspective, again, I'm not going to say you won't do it, but it diminishes, and that's what the law of diminishing intent is. So partly what we do at Building Champions is we help people take action and take it quickly. We have a slide up here that says for more information, you can reach us at info@buildingchampions.com. We're on Facebook, and we also tweet, and so we're coming up with all kinds of ways. I'm sure we're going to have pigeons that we send out, and you can look up in the sky, and we'll see birds up carrying the Building Champions message. But anyway, all kinds of reasons for us to reach out, and so if we can help you in any way, grateful for it. Thank you so much for listening. I wish you well, and if there's some way that we can help you complete your simple business planning tool, let us know. Have a great day.